we have your attention, please? We'll be starting up shortly. Good evening. Welcome to the Lowell Planning Board for Monday, April 7th, 2014. Tonight, we do have a public hearing on for new business and a rezone petition, 1291 Middlesex Street. In accordance with Mass General Laws, Chapter 40A, Section 5, the Lowell Planning Board will hold a public hearing to hear all interested persons relative to an ordinance to amend the Code of Ordinances, City of Lowell, Massachusetts, with respect to Appendix A, therefore entitled Zoning. The amendment would establish the institutional zoning district to include the parcel of land located at 1291 Middlesex Street. The area proposed to be rezoned presently lies within the traditional two-family zoning district. May we hear the case for the applicant, please?
James Flood, 549 Roger Street, Lowell, representing Soho Development LLC, who was the developer of the residential dormitory at 141 Marginal Street, and also Joseph and Mary Consalvo, the owners of the premises at 1291 Middlesex Street. With me tonight is Jim McClutchy from Soho Development, also Dennis Scannell from Soho Development, and Bernie Paquin from our engineers, Dana Perkins. I know we're here for zone change tonight, but I think the reason for it, I'm going to explain the reason for it. I have plans, which eventually will have to come back to you if this is approved, but I didn't know whether it'd be easier if I gave you these plans you could look at while we're going forward, if that's all right with you.
Attorney Flood.
I'd like to see that too. It would be helpful.
Thank you, counsel.
As the notice stated, we are before you tonight requesting that the institutional zone that is presently at 141 Marginal Street be extended to include the entire parcel at 1291 Middlesex Street. The reason for this request is that Soho has entered into a purchase and sale agreement with the Consolos, and they're desirous of constructing a new driveway into the dormitory site. This is not a new idea, and let me just give you a little bit of the history. When we first were considering this proposal, the idea of a driveway in that site was considered. We met with the residents on Livingston at that time, and they had some real concern about two-way traffic in that driveway. They didn't want people coming out and going up Livingston Avenue and causing problems. So at that point in time, we did not go forward with it. The university has requested that we pursue it at this point in time because they felt it would be a safer entrance for the students, for emergency vehicles, fire department, ambulances, and it seemed to make sense. So that's why we're here tonight. As you're aware, the present access is by way of Marginal Street from Middlesex Street. We enter in between the City of Lowell Bonds and the car wash, and you come down and then you turn. So it's not a direct line in, and we feel that this new proposal would be better. If the zoning is allowed, we will have to come back to you for site plan approval, and you can place whatever conditions you would on this proposal if you feel is good. We'd also need a variance from the Board of Appeals for the width of the curb cut. As you can see from the plan, the second and third page, the proposed plan would call for a one-way entrance into the dormitory site with a one-way access gate located just into the Marginal Street site where you would have to have a pass key to get in. The plan also proposes a turnaround on the site, and there would be some short-term parking located on the left portion of the parcel. We've made a commitment, and it would be a condition of approval when it gets here, that would be short-term parking. We would place signs, limited 15-minute parking, and it would be enforced by the University of Mass Police Department. The reason we put it in there is if someone was coming with a pizza delivery or someone was coming to pick up a student or drop someone off, they could park there for 15 minutes and then exit out. We're also providing a lot of new green space on the site. We're providing fences on both sides for screening on the abutting properties and a decorative fence that comes along the front. And there'll also be a nice sign entering the site. I think you're all familiar with the surrounding neighborhood. It's mostly commercial buildings, apartment buildings, and multi-unit buildings. It's our opinion that this proposal is not detrimental at all to the neighborhood. As a matter of fact, with the additional green space, the plantings, and the screening, we feel it would be an improvement. Mr. McCletchie has met with the Highlands Neighborhood Association on 2 occasions to discuss this, and they have no problems. Unfortunately, Nancy Judge cannot be here tonight, but she indicated that she has no problem with this. And we've also met with representatives of the Livingston Street Avenue, and like I said, we've made a commitment that it would only be a one-way drive in, there would be limited parking, short-term only, and that's a definite commitment that we've made. Another problem, which it's a problem some of the parents of the students, if you put in your GPS 141 Marginal Street to get to the dormitory, you come into the dead-end portion of Marginal Street. So we changed the address to 1291 Middlesex Street, which would be a lot easier to get to. But I think it's better for traffic. I think it's better, like I said, for emergency vehicles, ambulances, fire department, and I think it would be improvement for the neighborhood. So we're asking for an affirmative recommendation on this, scheduled in front of the City Council next Tuesday, and we're here to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Council.
Anything else?
Okay. Does anybody else here want to speak in favor of the zoning recommendation? Anybody in favor of the zoning recommendation? In favor? Hearing none, does anybody want to speak in opposition of the zoning recommendation? Yep, you have to come to the microphone, state your name and address for the record. Yep. Just state your name and address for the record. Absolutely. Yep.
My name is Mark Caribbean. I live on 6 Livingston Avenue, and I also have the property on 1280 Middlesex Street, which my family's been there since 1944. And I don't know which of the residents that the attorney has said they've gotten in touch with on Livingston Ave, but I have about 6 people here, of which none of us has spoken to him. I know he spoke to Ann Seepy, and they sent the plans to her directly, but they have not spoken to any of us, because 90% of the neighborhood is totally against this. And there are 2 exits on Marginal Street, of which the university says they're in favor of. They have the gate blocked, which they could allow people to go through there, and they're not allowing them to go through there as of what I'm told. They did try to pass this, believe it was either a year and a half ago, and there was opposition then to it. I'm sure there's a few more gentlemen from the neighborhood who would like to speak. It is not going to be, the access is of about maybe 75 to 100 yards from the other access panel. And the emergency vehicles that they're talking about are maybe 75 yards difference of the entrances on Marginal Street. I've grown up there my whole life. I'm 49 years old. I used to play in the GE parking lot before it was the building that it is now. And there was always tons of traffic down there before the 8 or 10 houses that were built on Marginal Street are now there in the parking lot that was previously a GE parking lot. And the access gate that's there, I'm sure is more than capable of allowing traffic to go in and out of there, where there would be pizza delivery people, as they sort of speak, that they're doing this for. I think that's kind of a costly project for just pizza delivery people, originally, from what we were told. But it is a 2-way in and out. It's not a 1-way gate, because they have to turn around and come out of there. There's going to be large lights that are going to have to be put up there, as we're told, signs. I'm sure that Lowell is going to be, or UMass Lowell will be putting up cameras, spotlights, as they do in all their parking lots. All of our homes are right there. My parents are 78 and 80 years old. Their bedrooms are right there. It's going to be affected by that, as well as all the other families in the neighborhood. Not to mention, the street is full of little kids. People already come barreling down our street, and that causing, I'm sure eventually that people will be able to go in and out of that gate once it's passed. To tear a home down that's there zoned and changed to industrial, or whatever they need, commercial, that they're saying they need to do it from that acreage, is not a benefit to the neighborhood by any means. It's a residential neighborhood. There is some commercial businesses down the street, but as far as abutting to Livingston Ave, it is 100% residential. It is not any type of anything but single-family homes on there, across the street, and next to it are 2 apartment houses. But you know, I know none of the residents here or anyone that I've spoken to that have gotten letters are in favor of this at all. And I don't know who in the Highlands thing they spoke to, but there's nobody in the area that they spoke to. And it's definitely not a neighborhood thing that we're in favor of at all. And I'm sure somebody else would like to say something, but we are definitely not in favor of this at all. We have not been approached.
Hi, my name is Scott Roberge, 1296 Middlesex Street. Been a resident there for 20-plus years, and I don't believe it'll be a good fit in the neighborhood. Right now, it's perfect with the single-family house. There's no issues with the traffic flow other than normal traffic. At 8, 9 o'clock at night, the street's pretty quiet for Middlesex Street lately, you know. I don't believe it's a good fit. I'm not in favor of it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Jayesh Patel. I live on 15 Livingston Avenue, which is the second dwelling on the avenue coming down. It's a steep hill. If you come from the top, from the boulevard, you come down, you can see people coming down really fast because it's a hill. Kids play over there. Yes, I understand they want something to deliver pizza or something, but once the road is open, people will come flying down. And now it's nice because kids play on the street. We got 6, 7 kids. Myself, I have 2. My neighbors have 4 or 5 kids. If you go more up the hill, there are a lot of small kids though. We opposed this thing last year or maybe a couple years back. But again, this thing came up. It's nothing that there is no way that marginal street can do anything. There is a lot of room. They can increase it, make the roads a little bit wider, because there may be grass or something which is covering. But there is a lot of room. There are a lot, on the other side also they can come out. And there is one road which is closed, the gate is closed. They can open it, they can have access. I'm just talking about the families and the people living on that Livingston Avenue. I've been living there since 1996. This was a brand new construction which was built. And I'm staying over there. We never have issues. Since this thing has popped up, even the kids can come and tell, Daddy, are they going to break this house? Because this is a street where kids play also on top. It will be a major issue. Because when cars come down, other people come out of the driveway, it will be a big hassle. So I'm opposing this also, though. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Good evening. My name's Eric Gitcher. I live at 34 Livingston Ave. The reason why I bought my home in Livingston Ave 20 years ago is because of how quiet the neighborhood was in the flow patterns of traffic. There were hardly any traffic on the street. Over the last few years, you can see they come over the hill at a rapid rate of speed, and they come flying down, and the children have to run for their lives to each side. And we've made numerous complaints to the police department, and nothing seems to be working. Currently, there's 170, upwards of 170 parking spots in the UMass Lowell dorm area. And that means that the only way in is that area, and the exit will now become the marginal street end. So meaning the 170 plus, 165 plus vehicles will travel either Middlesex Street or down Livingston Ave to approach that area. That won't help with our neighborhood issues. I'm not speaking out against UMass Lowell. I'm a former graduate of UMass Lowell, but as UMass Lowell is getting bigger, they're approaching on the quality of our lives in our neighborhoods. And for me, for one, if the cars keep coming over the street and this happens, then we have to make a decision for the safety of our child. And it would be sad for me to leave that neighborhood based off of, more of a traffic flow pattern coming through the Livingston Ave neighborhood. And I'm sorry to say, but I'm speaking against it because of that fact that we're trying to protect the children in the neighborhood and our quality of life. And that's the reason why I rose to speak tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Mark Blanchette. I live at 30 Livingston Ave. I've been there since 1994. And basically, my concerns would be the same as what just about everybody else already stated. It's a safety thing, the traffic. Cars going down that street already go down there at a pretty good rate of speed. I live near the end of the street. I'm the third house to the end, and the cars are braking pretty hard after they pass by my house to get down to Middlesex Street. They're slowing down all at once. They go down that hill pretty quick, and if this were to happen, I would imagine that the traffic would only get worse. Having a bunch of college students driving up and down that street like that, with all the kids that live on that street, I feel that the safety of the children on that street would be they'd be put in harm's way possibly if this was to go through. So to me, it's a safety issue. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else like to speak in regards to the recommendation? Anyone else want to be heard? Anybody else? Hearing none. I'll turn over to the board members. Just to let the parties know, what's before us tonight is we only make a recommendation on this matter. It's a non-binding recommendation that goes to the city council. Attorney Flood, do you have a scheduled date before the city council?
Next Tuesday.
Next Tuesday? Okay.
Yep.
All right. Okay, at this point in time, I'll turn it over to any board members who have any questions. Mr. Fischett, do you mind if I start with you?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Attorney Flood, I just want to clarify from some of the concerns and the residents that were here. When you said you met with the neighborhood group and Nancy Judge wasn't able to be here, was there an actual meeting, and did they reach out to the people that lived on the street?
Jim, why don't you, he was there twice.
I don't know how they advertise.
You just state your name for the record, sir, if you would. Thank you very much.
Jim McCletchy, Soho Development. I don't know how they advertise the meetings, but it was a scheduled meeting of the Highlands and the Lower Highlands. At, what church was that? Where was the meeting? Where was it? St. Margaret's. At St. Margaret's Church, yes.
Was it well attended? Do you have an idea?
Yes, there was probably 25 or so people, yes.
Okay.
Probably 20.
At about 20 to 25.
20 to 25 people. Mr. Chairman, I don't know. Eric?
Nope, you can't ask any questions. This is his turn. I have to follow a certain procedure, or then our hearing will be invalid. So go ahead, Mr. Fischett.
Okay.
Just to touch base, and I think just reiterate what the chairman indicated as well, and this is not a vote this evening on the configuration of the access, and it's whether or not to rezone it, but, and there were some legitimate items brought up here that typically get resolved or discussed when that proposal comes before us for site plan, but the lighting and the signage, I'm just curious, what type of signage are they?
Gonna have a sign, I think it shows on
It's
the
not
plan.
gonna be an internally illuminated
No,
sign?
no,
is
because
it? Okay.
Mass Lowell.
And then the lighting, I'm assuming is going to be,
Similar as the parking lot. So it would
Okay.
not, plus there'd be fences on both sides
okay.
to screen the neighbors.
And I understand the concerns that were raised previously when the proposal was submitted, and I'm certainly sensitive to the impact of a neighborhood by putting an access drive to a major institution that could impact a neighborhood that previously didn't have that exposure to it. However, I have to say, in looking at this, and I'm looking for really I'll be looking for some data at some point, assuming and not knowing what's going to happen with this, but if it comes back before us, is understanding the trip generations. This whole complex, and this is what I was concerned before, we weren't sure if this was going to be dormitories or whether it was going to be private apartments initially.
A few years ago, yes.
And at this point, you have a commitment from the university, and we're looking at the entire building is dormitory housing. Therefore, the main purpose for those students to be there is the university, which is across from where Livingston Ave is, so it's in the other direction.
Yep.
So I'm looking at the major roads that are in and around there, and it'll be important to get data on trip generations and where some of this is coming from and where would it go. It doesn't appear that Livingston is going to be the major access or an extension of the driveway to get there at this point, but obviously we need to have some data. And you know, I'm curious as to from the perspective of what would our city's traffic engineer have to say on this. Now, I see you've put the drive so that it is off-center from Livingston, so it's not a, it's not a four-way intersection. My understanding now, and just so I can understand what you're proposing, I did not believe that you were proposing to make this a one-way circulation so that it'll no longer be, you can no longer access the development from Marginal Street. Will that still be a two-way from the entrance that's there right now? Will that still be a two-way entrance and exit?
I think it's the intent to make it an exit, but, I mean, I can't speak for the university on that, but I think that's the intent. Maybe you have an answer, Jim, on that.
It's up in the air, but they are considering making exit only. Yes.
Exit only, coming out Marginal.
I mean, it would just be another a release valve to have another
Entrance?
entrance.
Yeah.
I mean, I just, that way there, it doesn't force everything going to this spot right here. I mean, I just,
I see what you're saying, if you came around the corner from over there.
Yeah,
you could
right.
do it, yeah, yeah.
I mean, why-
But I don't think a final decision has been made, and,
right,
I mean, that would be something that would, if this did
Right.
pass, we'd have to come back to, and that's a
Sure.
decision that this board would make.
sure. I mean, I don't, I mean, driving through there, I see no reason why you would change that, to be honest with you. And again, that would alleviate, I mean, it was a good point. So every car that's there would be forced to go to that intersection, and I can understand, I mean, that's currently gonna create a lot more activity there.
Yeah, if
That
you're
isn't
coming.
there right now.
If you're coming from Chelmsford or
Right.
Tingsboro, you could go in the old entrance. yeah.
Right, exactly. So, I mean, I just, I think that's something to consider on this. And I think, Mr. Chairman, the other thing I'd want to see, obviously, is some, and again, Attorney Flood, I don't know what type of information you were looking to provide to us. And again, I don't know if this is going to pass,
Yeah,
but
no.
I would really be looking for, and I had requested, we had made it a condition of the last approval for the additional units to have an analysis done of the parking as it relates to the parking garage. Because clearly, if a lot of the students are there going to utilize the new parking garage,
On the
again,
other
that's
side.
directing everything away from that site.
Right.
And that's important to have as far as data, and I think we made that a condition of the last project. I would encourage you to accelerate that analysis in order to have with this going forward.
Well, I did speak with your traffic engineer regarding the parking situation at the site, and he was satisfied that there's sufficient parking on the other side to handle this whole area. Now, I thought if he wrote a letter to that effect, that would satisfy you, because I think you're gonna rely on Eric's
Well,
opinion.
we'll work with Eric
Yeah.
to get some data on that,
Right.
because I
No-
do
no
want to have.
problem, but I did
don't-
speak with him.
I don't plan to make a decision on this without getting additional data on that, because it's either going to work against you or for you, but we can't make a decision without that data, obviously.
Correct.
And as far as the request for the rezone, I think a lot of the issues that were raised are issues that really would be addressed at site plan. So at least at this juncture, I would not have any reservations in at least recommending the proposed zoning change, so then we can actually take a good look at what we can do with this. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fischett. Joe?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Questions? Mr. Will?
Mr. Frechette made the point earlier that the vote tonight, which is a recommendation to the city council, but the city council's vote on the rezoning is not a vote on the layout of the access driveway. And that's very true. It is, however, a vote on whether or not an access driveway will be allowed. Currently, under the zoning, they do not have the right to put in an access driveway. If this lot is rezoned to institutional, they will have an as-right status to put in an access driveway. So this rezoning vote is a vote on the question of whether or not an access to this property from Middlesex Street will be allowed. The review that this board would have, should the rezoning go through, would be a site plan review, in which we would be discussing the shape of the driveway, the shape of the landscaped area, and the plantings that go into the landscaped area, among other matters, but that type of thing.
Safety.
But the material question of whether or not an access should be provided from Middlesex Street will be answered by the city council's action on the rezoning. I'd like to ask my board members to take a look at the zoning map, to take a look at what is being proposed. And to take a look at how the zoning is currently drawn. This zoning line, like most of the zoning lines in the city, this boundary, is drawn at the rear of the block. Fronting on this block along Middlesex Street are a number of residential properties. Obviously, the road, the mid-block, the road on the other side of the block, you don't have one until you get to Broadway Street. And so you can almost think of this as being like a city block, and back to back, you have a row of houses and a row of something else. The row of houses front on one street, and the row of something else, be that businesses, be that multifamily apartments, but some other use fronts on something else. And the way that we drew our zoning map in this city, we didn't draw lines down the middle of the street because we didn't want to have one row of uses on one side of the street and directly across the street from it and different, potentially incompatible use. Think of the difference between a row of nice single-family homes across the street from a row of strip malls and car washes, okay? You're facing them. You drive down that street, and this is the neighborhood that has the car washes, versus drawing the line down the back of the block, so that you drive down the street and you have a row of houses across from a row of houses, and you drive down the other street, you have a row of strip malls across from a row of strip malls. You have one street that's the residential street and one street that's the commercial street. That's the way we did our zoning when we drew this zoning map. That was a deliberate and conscious choice done and considered very important for the purpose of maintaining neighborhood character. In suburban type of situations, having very different use, having zoning lines down the middle of the street can make some sense, because you've got a parking lot in front of some sort of large suburban development, and a parking lot in front of some other large suburban development, or a parking lot in front of a big suburban commercial use, and across the street, you've got the big road entrance to a cul-de-sac, and the houses are very much on that cul-de-sac. But here in the city, we really live with what's across the street from us. And so, the zoning map, as it's drawn, represents the policy decision that there's going to be, along Middlesex Street, this neighborhood of traditional two-family homes, mainly. This is Lowell, it's old, there's things that got mixed in, but it's going to be this traditional residential neighborhood, and it connects to a couple of other residential neighborhoods back off of Middlesex Street that have a couple of different zonings, but they're both residential zonings, okay? You have Middlesex Street, and the streets to the south of it are a residential neighborhood, And then at the back of the block, it transitions to the institutional district in which UMass Lowell and associated facilities are located. And the residential neighborhood faces in on itself, and next to it, you have the campus of UMass Lowell, which faces in on itself. For the effect of the students on that campus and living in this dorm, they live in a dorm which they then cross over the railroad tracks and go up to Broadway Street and go to their classes. It faces in there. Changing the zoning to allow an access off of Middlesex Street would be a policy decision that we're not going to have the residential neighborhood and the campus. We're going to have the campus open up to that residential neighborhood. Now, I don't care to venture an opinion one way or the other right now on that matter, because I feel that's an important question which deserves a process. And the decision about whether that should be done is one which incorporates more than the purpose here. The purpose of rezoning this one lot would be to allow these benefits to this property owner and his students and UMass Lowell, the users of that land. There's a term in the law, spot zoning. It's generally applied to, you pick out one guy's property that's in the middle of a certain zone and you rezone it so that he can do a bunch of things that nobody else in the area around there can do. Now, that's a concept that, again, was developed for more suburban type of developments and doesn't always apply completely accurately in Lowell. Here in Lowell, we often have these little bitty tiny zones, little zones that might be 4 lots. If it's an intersection and you just grab the 4 lots that are right around it and you have, maybe on those corners you have storefronts with apartments above and then all around it you've got a residential, we'll have a little tiny zone. But there's a reason for that, because that crossroads, that intersection is a place where there are businesses. In this case, rezoning this one lot and not anything else around it wouldn't be the action the city would take if it decided it wanted to have the institutional district and the university start fronting up on Middlesex Street. If the city made that decision and went through a process to recommend whether or not it should do that and how it should do that, it would not end up with the decision that we should rezone this one lot, which, by the way, isn't even the last lot in the district. There would be one orphan on Middlesex Street next to this lot, sitting there still in the TTF zone, okay? We'd have, as you go along the street, from the light industrial zone, as you're going in town along Middlesex Street, you'd have one lot that's traditional 2-family, one lot that's institutional, and then the next lot is traditional 2-family. Although, typically, you can't say expanding a zone is spot zoning. For all intents and purposes, Middlesex Street and Marginal Street are 2 different areas. One of them is this section of Marginal Street. One of them is part of the UMass campus at this point, which faces up onto Broadway Street and has that type of activity. And the other one is, in this particular area, a residential neighborhood. I have a question for staff. Has the question of spot zoning on this rezoning been put to the city solicitor's office?
Spot zoning is usually reviewed when the solicitor's office drafts the proposed ordinance. It's part of their review process when they're drafting it, so it's something they would have considered.
Okay.
So I guess since it came before this board, since it made it this far, they must have felt as though that it wasn't spot zoning.
Okay. And I certainly respect the opinion of the legal department on legal matters. But there is, these ideas I'm describing, they aren't simply about a formal compliance with the law. They're about, in this case, the question of spot zoning is the same as the question about what should this little neighborhood district along Middlesex Street be. And I believe that if we're talking about rezoning, and a rezoning which would have an effect of altering the character of a neighborhood, that question should be answered through a planning process which takes into account the district, rather than just looking at how to accommodate one abutting property owner. I have my own opinions, and they might not be the same as other people in this room, about the ultimate outcome of that procedure, but I feel that it can only be positive for the city that it takes place, and that consideration about what to do to our zoning map and what by right rights property owners should have should take into account a plan or a planning process, or at least the consideration about the district as a whole. And so I do not believe that the decision that this property owner should be able to do this by right, this thing by right on this property that he owns in this district should go forward. I believe we should offer a negative recommendation on this. I think some other action would be appropriate. For example, should a driveway, which for a use that would not be allowed in the district, be authorized by special permit? Under a special permit, the city can consider not just the question of the layout, but the question of whether or not this should happen. The decision about whether or not this property owner should have the right to do this in a special permit review situation would be made when this board is already looking at their plans, has their plans in front of them, and is deciding, do we like what they're proposing to do enough to give them the right to do it? In this case, we're being asked to give the applicant the right to do this without having that review, without even really looking at what the proposal would look like. We'd be deciding whether or not, or rather the city council, ideally acting in accordance with our recommendation, would be deciding whether or not they should be allowed to do that prior to the design even being submitted. I don't think we should take that action.
Mr. Lockhart?
Yeah, ultimately, I think the responsibility of this board is to, after listening to a little discussion tonight, is to make this site work for a growing university and to take care of the needs of the neighborhood. And having said that, I think there are three different parties here that are important to this discussion. One, you've mentioned, you've talked to the traffic engineer and gotten some feedback from him. And as Jerry has pointed out, we really need to have some hard data going forward on this. There's some safety concerns in the neighborhood, and we need to be able to justify what we're doing. The second, from a safety standpoint, is emergency vehicles and the fire department. Have you had any discussions with them? I know we're only talking about zoning tonight, but given the
No, we
fact
haven't at this point, but that would come up in the site plan review. But it's
Yeah,
a
of course it would.
straight shot in, which is a lot easier than going around the corner.
Okay. Is there a length on this would be a driveway, obviously. Is there any kind of a length? Do you know what that might be at this point? I mean, that's an issue. I'm just curious.
My name is Bernie Pequin. I'm an engineer with Dana Perkins.
Right.
I have a larger set of plans that I'd like to refer to get that correct answer. These are reduced plans.
Plans, so I can ask it, I guess.
It would be 160 feet from the edge of Middlesex Street to the existing parking
All right,
area.
so that's within the, I was just curious. And my view here is that if we can rezone part of this to make it a safer, more efficient layout to make the site work better, then I'm in favor of it. I think it's important that the residents understand that if in fact that does go through, that the safety issues and the site plan issues could be resolved at another meeting. And one last question. I know we have, and I should probably know this, but there's a new historic district over there across the street that was established last year, and I'm not sure whether this is part of it.
Is it further up on Harvard Street and Livingston Street?
Yeah, it's Livingston
Right.
Street. I'm
And
not
Harvard,
sure.
too, 'cause we've already had that before
It's
us.
up, yeah, all right, so I don't think that's.
Because if
No,
you
no,
look
this-
at it, see, the bottom of Livingston and Harvard, actually, on the bottom of the street, both Livingston and Harvard, the very bottom of the street, before you get to Middlesex, is the traditional two-family. So we have a lot of big-size
it's all
traditional
across the street.
two-families on Livingston and Harvard, way down the bottom. And then as you go up the street,
Single.
not too far, then it turns into the traditional single-family. So I think up in the traditional single-family is
Yeah,
where
it's
it
all
goes up
across
into
the
the
street.
historic
I just-
area.
yeah.
Right, right. Because we've had a plan come back before us further up on Harvard Street for that issue.
Right.
Right.
I don't have any other questions, Mr. Chairman. I'm all set.
You know, obviously, when they come in for the zoning change, what happens is, if we recommend in favor and the city council recommends in favor, that is not an endorsement of this plan. If they get the zoning change, they can come back with any plan they want that meets zoning, and we would have no say in the matter. They're not guaranteed it's gonna be what they're showing us as a proposal today. I mean, like if we've seen in the future, person comes in, changes the zoning, saying they're gonna build this, things change on financial thing, they sell it off. Someone else builds it, and all they have to do is go and get the occupancy permit. When they put the dorms in the past, and they come in for the expansion of the dorm just not too long ago, our whole main question was, where are all the cars parking? And the information that was provided to us is, majority of the people were going over the crosswalk they have that went over the railroad. When this plan first came in, without that crosswalk, I think they were gonna have a very, very difficult getting that plan approved. The fact that they were going over the crosswalk, and they had bus transportation, taking them to different parts of the campus and everything else, and when it came back the last time, the main question was, and what planning board member Mr. Fichette was saying is, where are these cars parking that belong for the dorm? And the numbers that we have, and the conditional on that approval was to prove back to us before it goes further, is, are they gonna be parking in that lot? And now there was a proposed, there is now a new lot that's been built. So the other question was, we wanted to break down the percentages, who's parking over the thing and where they going. And so when that comes in, And on that site plan, is if this gets approved, as Attorney Flood says, is whenever they come in on a site plan, they have to give a copy of all the plans to the Division of Planning and Development, who's represented tonight with us here, the fire department, police department, water department, engineering staff, and the traffic engineer. And then they make recommendations back to us on what's called the site plan. And then on the site plan, by law, we can either approve it, or we can approve it with conditions. Technically, we cannot deny it, but sometimes we can put conditions on that are not favorable to the applicant. So the main question is, I'm saying, we know what their intent is, but we don't always know if that's what's gonna happen in the future. From being here as long as I have, I know things change. I mean, obviously, it's nice to see what their intent is. It puts everybody on board, like, why do you want it to be changed? Getting back to the question of spot zoning, what we usually get from the law department, we don't see it here, but in the past, every time when we've had zoning changes, the law department usually gives us a letter and says, as long as you are extending a zone, you're not in violation. If you pick something in the middle of a zone and nobody on all four corners of that lot are in the same zone, then the courts come down and say, then that's spot zoning. If that's spot zoning, then obviously somebody can still petition to have a zone change. And if we had a letter from the law department that says, well, that's spot zoning, usually we trust our law department, so keep us on the legal kiln of what we do, and so wouldn't the city council. So what my experience here, I don't see it as spot zoning because it's expanding a zone, and any individual property who owns property in the city has the right to do so. So some of the concerns, as indicated, I mean, the lighting and the traffic, we would have reports back from the city engineer on, and what we would ask from the applicant is, what do they think is the amount of trips that are gonna be generated that day? And we can make them do a traffic count, whichever, and then our traffic people would make a recommendation, would give to us. Sometimes our traffic engineer even comes to the meetings for us if we request his presence, Mr. EB. And then their people would give them their traffic flow out, and then that traffic people would say, you know, is it beneficial to make it two ways, both ways? Was it better off to take undo Marginal Street where it's gated and blocked off, and have all that access for emergency vehicles? So what I believe Mr. Flood said earlier when the thing started, I believe is, if the zoning request is allowed by the city council, and if they want to come with this, they have to write to us, they have to ask for site plan approval, and then it'd also have to go before the zoning board of appeals. Because the width of the curb that they're cutting is a little wider than what's allowed under our regulations. So if we even approved it, and then the zoning board of appeals didn't, then they'd have to come back with a different plan. And any recommendations that we give with any conditions, those conditions have to stay on the plan when it goes to the zoning board of appeals. So if we get back from the site plan, then as the other board members saying, any lighting, we have to make sure it does not go on your property, has to be lighted down, the type of lighting has to be used, the engineer department will look at that. If it's the traffic, they would see, you know, where, are they gonna pick up any more traffic on Livingston Street? I mean, because technically it is pretty hard to come out of there and cut straight across on Livingston Street. I mean, I remember this area very well. I remember when Angelino's used to be, you know, Pizza by Charles back in the 60s, you know, and I know where Bain is right there, and I know where the house is, and I know where Black Book is, where I wasn't supposed to play on, but we weren't gonna go there. And so, the area, and you know, if you look at it, you know, you have the car wash, the multifamilies, and a lot of the multifamilies in the area. So, on itself, moving the zone over, my concern when I first looked on it, the most important thing I thought of it is, if they control this zone properly by getting in there, I think it definitely opens up a public safety issue. If they're gonna come in and add those dorms on, and I hate to say it because what we see today, you know, at schools and dorms and even at, you know, military bases, something happens, you gotta get emergency vehicles in there. Would this be the right way to get the vehicles in? And then hopefully that can tell us, you know, if there's in part of the site plan that we approved earlier, as mentioned to us by the applicants, is all these kids do not have cars. So there's not gonna be one car per unit. And we basically get that. I mean, as parents and as people paying for kids to go to school, we understand who has cars and who don't. Most of the cars are gonna be, you know, they come through that, you know, a lot of them are people who live in the neighborhood, are students from the area. So that opens up a whole extra plan on the site plan. And I mean, the issues that we look at is, the neighbors all talked about, was this, the safety, the traffic, the lighting. I understand all that, and I think, as indicated, most of that would come in on the site plan. They'd have to meet that criteria on the site plan, and then, as well, go for the ZBA curb cut. I know the question about, you know, whether neighbors were contacted or there. I mean, all they have to do under the law is publicize it, and therefore, each person has the right to come down and speak, as long as the requirements are met for the publication of the zoning change, and make sure it's publicized. They've done their burden. If they reached out, met with some neighbors, not others, that's not a requirement of an applicant. It's what we call it, you know, meet in good faith. So if they haven't been notified, I'm sorry for that, but obviously, they said they met with some people, so obviously some people had received some of the notice on it. So getting back to that, the question is whether the zoning, we're going to recommend the zoning for the city council. As they say, it's not a binding recommendation, whether, regardless of what we say, the city council is the one who controls the zoning. They make the zoning map, and we're only here as a recommending body with, you know, what weight that has. I guess you'd have to ask each individual council. If they feel that they don't want that zone to be cut that way, fine. That's totally within their prerogative, and we're just here to recommend. So those are the only comments I have at this point in time.
Mr. Chairman, can I just have a
Sure,
question here?
absolutely.
To Joe, to staff, any comments from staff as far as what's being proposed?
Not at this point. I had thought the applicant had initially reached out to the engineering department as well to get some initial feedback, but I haven't heard anything from the engineering department directly. Could address
Any
that.
further discussion? Did someone have a question when I was earlier? I'll try to answer that if I can at this point of the stage, where I couldn't answer it earlier because of procedure I have to follow. I think you had a question, Eric, was it?
I was just going to comment on Mr. Fischett that there's a misrepresentation going on here tonight. We're in the Lower Highlands. Nancy Judge is the Upper Highlands. Okay, so meeting with the Upper Highlands has nothing to do with our group. Okay, so when they say that, please understand we're in the Lower Highlands and not in the Upper Highlands on your decision-making process. That was misrepresented.
No, and I appreciate,
Is
because I'm
there-
always sensitive to that, because, Eric,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, just, yeah, no, and I'm always sensitive to that, because we have neighborhood, and I came from the neighborhood groups, and, you know, it's tough to make a representation that you're representing the neighborhood, and, you know, who actually attended the meeting, so that was my concern to clarify.
And I think it's very hard for a neighborhood group to represent all of us when
I agree.
we have people who work for a living who
Yep.
can't make every meeting, and they're not very active in the other areas of the neighborhood, but they're active in their street, and there's a lot of people on that street who have little children, and we've watched the increase in traffic. And you know, whether it's a cut this way or that way, we've watched it. I know the theories behind it. I'm a civil engineer. I understand the theory with the traffic engineer and everything. But when you have a 13-year-old who's playing in the middle of the street and people are coming over that crest of the hill, and when they come from the top, you can't see the bottom. They just come flying over. And we've made numerous complaints to the police department, and there's just no way that they can police it. So someone's going to get hurt on that street if they open this up, and hopefully it's not my child.
I just would
Eric,
encourage
I got a
you,
question.
I would encourage you to make sure then the neighbors that weren't part of the meeting, and make sure they were at the city council meeting for the public hearing. I think that's.
I just found out today at 3 o'clock that this was going on. I had no idea because I'm one house out of the zone that got mailed to.
No, I'm sensitive to that. That's how I came out of this. It was neighborhood groups representing that they were supposedly speaking on behalf of the entire neighborhood, and it was a similar situation, and it really wasn't the case where they were representing a particular street. So I think
Lowell-
that, you know, and again, I
Lowell
wanted
truly has a challenge in keeping the integrity of the neighborhoods together right now. And this is a fabulous neighborhood currently. And what this is going to do is change the whole character of that neighborhood, whether some people believe it or not, but it's going to. I'm sorry.
Is there a name for that neighborhood group, the Lower Highlands?
Lower Highlands Neighborhood Group.
Okay.
Is it an active group
If
now?
we-
At one time, it was an
I
active
think
group,
it's-
but is
yeah.
it
I believe it is. I get emails from them.
Lower
So
Highlands? Yep. Okay.
I believe the
Is
person
there a
who.
chairperson? that
I
they
just
should
looked at it. I thought it was Taya Dixon was, but I think it turned over to Andy Hostetler or
All
something.
right, if you could communicate that
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
to the applicant,
Yes.
I think.
Just, the meeting that we did go to was the Highlands and the Lower Highlands. We're both there.
Was.
And it was the meeting that the city manager attended, his last meeting with with those groups. So it was relatively well attended.
Well, all right.
Any of the board members have any further follow-ups?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I would like to reemphasize, to talk about why I raised the issue of spot zoning. It was not so much a legal concern. I do not believe any challenge based on a claim of spot zoning would survive, considering the fact that it abuts an existing institutional district. But rather, the legal concept of spot zoning is there because of a planning concept, which I think we should pay attention to, which is that you should not single out one particular property in a district for treatment different from everything else around it, because doing so can alter the character or have a detrimental effect on all of those, while by giving a benefit to one particular property owner. For our purposes here, the Middlesex Street Residential District and the UMass Lowell campus are two different places. Yes, they are two places that abut. There's two places that their backs abut. It's as if your backyard ends at a fence, and on the other side of the fence is the backyard of a commercial property. Okay? That is, imagine your street is residential, the next street is commercial, and one property on your street was changed to commercial. Would that be legally spot zoning? It might not be because it abuts it, but still, think about the effect on character on that. What the rezoning here is being asked to do is change the zoning, and what the change in zoning would do is to make this access driveway something they are allowed to do by right. Now, what I keep hearing on this board is, we'll get to the design, we'll get to these traffic concerns, we'll get to this traffic stuff later. Later, after the city takes an act to, possibly takes an act to give them the right to do it. That is what the decision about rezoning comes down to. If we want to get through all of the planning speak and everything, my bottom line here is that I think those issues about neighborhood safety, about the traffic counts, about where everybody's going to be parking, I had forgotten about that, Mr. Chairman. That is a very good point. Where the students there are going to be parking and how much traffic they would be generating there, those are decisions that that is information that the city should take into account before it makes the decision whether or not to give this property owner the right to have a driveway.
The question with that is
Can't do it.
when we change the zone, we don't guarantee any site that he's coming in with a driveway. We have no control of it. Okay, there's nothing here that Mr. Flood said has anything to do with UMass Lowell. This is a private entity. So we can't say because UMass Lowell wants it and they're above the railroad tracks on Broadway Street, this is what's going to happen. And the fact is, the reason, when you talk about the site plan issues, the only way you can address the site plan issue is when it comes back to us for the site plan. I mean, for the zoning, they can change this tomorrow and put something else in there and not come back, as I indicated earlier. So, I mean, if they wanted us to have control of the parking, the traffic, the engineering, I think it would be in our sitting zoning code that we should consider all these, as is for site plan, when it comes in for zoning change. And it doesn't. Because there's no guarantee they're coming back with the same plan that we've seen tonight.
Right.
So this was just a proposal saying, this is what we like to do, this is why we want to change it, which is good. And we've seen before, they come in and said, this is why we want to change it, and and people take it, get the zoning, and sell the property. I mean, we had people come in and tell us, I'm going to live here with my family, I want this family to have this and this. As soon as we're done with it, they go ahead and sell it.
Yeah.
I can name 2 or 3 places, but I'm not going to do it because we're on a public record here, but we've known that. And then we've said to the applicant, well, how long do you think you're selling? Well, a year or 2 ago, and that came out at a site plan later on a zoning change. So, we're told very simple from the council. We either vote for the zoning change, yes, or we vote for it, no. I mean, So I think, and for us to have a lot of these questions answered, the only remedy we have is, and the only way to do it is under the site plan.
And yet-
Because we don't have the benefit of giving the plans out to the 7 departments and giving all the feedback. So everything else at this point in time would be speculation on our behalf. So I think, it's either we feel it's a good thing for the neighborhood, or we feel it's not a good thing for the neighborhood. So, I mean, it's hard to say, I'm gonna consider traffic when I don't have any reports from the traffic engineer. I mean, who we rely highly on when it comes to on the, on site plan, or even special permit for that matter. I mean, say, for example, they come in and say, we just want this to come in one way, and we want to block the other one way it was going out. What if we disagree with that and say we want them both in, both out, both in, both out? And then we get the report that we've been waiting for, they're gonna come back in the future saying, well, where was most of these people, they're gonna be parking the cars here or there? And I think a lot of that helps answers the question. So, I mean, I think that's why, and I'm all right, we can say, we think this is gonna do this and this, but I think to say that we give a zoning change recommendation based on site plan without the necessary recommendations from the 7 department heads who we rely on heavily on a site plan, I mean, because I don't know what they're gonna come in and say. I mean, that's the burden the applicant's gonna have to do. They're gonna sit down and go meet with the DPD, we're gonna get feedback from them, and say, we try to do it this way, we try to do it that way. So it's really, I mean, we're limited on the zone change, and my bottom line is it's totally up to council. They create the zoning map, they create that, so it's either we vote for or against it, but to give it the site plan standard, I think it's above and beyond our control, because we're just guessing. Totally guesswork. And when we're guessing, well, we thought this was gonna happen even though no one told us. So that's the problems I have with it. I mean, I can understand what you're saying, but, I mean, the way I look at it, that's the way I look at it, is it's, he needs a site plan, needs a variance. If it comes back, the city council votes it down, no, then all this speculation, they won't be here for that consideration, but they're gonna try to change it for something else. I don't know, maybe they wanna change it to another zone, but I think to put the site plan standard on it without the benefit of the 7 department heads on the site plan recommendation, I think it's difficult to do because, as we all know, when we come to public hearings, we read the plan, sit down, go through everything else. You might be leaning one way, you come into a public hearing, you get more testimony and say, boy, I never even thought of that. And to think of zoning change on the site plan standard, I wouldn't go that far, but, I mean, I understand what you're saying, and what your opinion is, and mine was, I don't think we can consider it as a site plan on the zoning change. If so, then they should change our rules and regulations.
But,
because
Mr.
we're
Chairman-
limited to what we're doing.
But, Mr. Chairman, isn't that all a reason why making this decision to give them the right to do this through this process is the wrong process? You're right, we can't hold them to site plan standards as we're reviewing a zoning. And yet, this decision, should they have the right to do this, is one that should be made with certain information available to us. Available to us, meaning the city, whichever body would ultimately make that decision. What you just said sounded to me an awful lot like we should, that voting for, that supporting a zoning amendment would be supporting the right to give, would be support giving them the right to do this, and
I disagree.
we can't
No.
expect to.
I did not say that. I did not say that. I told them if they can change this zoning, they don't even have to come back with this plan. I said that from day one. They can come back with any other plan they want. We're not endorsing this plan.
But we wouldn't have to endorse this plan. We would be giving them the right to
No,
do
we
that.
don't. I disagree with you, Mr. Boyle.
I don't
But
understand how you can,
I don't have to explain my
is this not a
situation.
use, let
I
me
don't have
ask
to
Steph.
explain my reasoning to you.
Let me
okay?
ask Steph, would this driveway be a use allowed by right under the zoning as, if it was changed institutional?
I guess I'm just going to try to clarify your question. You mean just allowing the use of a driveway for the property, I guess, to the adjacent property?
Right.
If it was changed to an institutional, to be included in the institutional zoning district, yes, a driveway could be constructed to connect the existing parking area for the area that's currently in the institutional zone with the newly incorporated area.
So, okay, so that sounds to me like the action being taken, the proposal to rezone, would give them the right to build the driveway. Mr. Flood, is that why you're here? Because rezoning it, you're seeking the right to build the driveway?
We want to build a driveway, yes.
Okay, and the rezoning.
But
would do that.
I stated, we're coming to you for site plan approval, where you can put whatever conditions you want on it. I mean, we're not trying to get around anything. And you're making it sound like this is a conspiracy. It isn't. And this is simply what we're trying to do. And we feel that it's going to be safer for the neighborhood. It's one way in. They didn't want to, and that's the only reason we're here. And
But if it's allowed by right, the assumption is therefore that it is going to happen, and the review available to the board, and we talk about this every time we have a site plan review, is that we basically don't get to make a yes/no decision. The decision is made yes. We pretty much have to approve a site plan, and we discuss the design. That's different than, for example, a special permit, in which we get to answer the question yes or no. So the zoning, the decision about the rezoning is the yes/no decision.
well,
So I would
our
ask
zone.
my fellow board members to think, do we want the city council to make the yes/no decision on whether a driveway should go through? Do we want the city, of whatever body, to make this yes/no decision in theory? Or do we want the city to be able to make that yes/no decision in practice by looking at what is actually being proposed? As Mr. Chairman said, if this is rezoned, not only do we lose the right to say yes/no to a driveway, we lose the right to say yes/no to all sorts of things. This is one of the most permissive zoning districts in the entire city. And it is very dangerous to take in a rezoning action based on the assumption they're going to do one thing when they could do another. We would be taking an action, the city would be taking an action if it rezoned this to say yes to a driveway and to say yes to all sorts of other uses which are intended to be in institutional districts and not in rows of residential housing.
That's true.
An applicant can come in with a zoning amendment to change the zoning map. It is also possible to come in with a zoning amendment to change something's use, either on the table of uses or by changing some of the language in the zoning code about accessory uses. And that could be done in a way that gives the city the authority to issue by special permit, for example, an access driveway to a use in in another zoning district. I don't think this is the right process. I don't think we should approve this. I don't think that the yes/no decision about whether a driveway should go in should be made, about whether a driveway should be allowed, should be made without leaving the city any sort of fallback to make the decision no, once they see what it would really mean. We're going to make a yes/no decision that a driveway here is okay before we look at traffic information? Does that make sense?
Mr. Chairman, may I?
Sure.
Mr. Boyle, to a point, understand what you're saying, and I know when we took the vote on whether to abandon Edward Street, and I felt that the way, matter of fact, Mass General Law was written, it didn't really give us really the ability to analyze the data. I thought that was sufficient in order to give a recommendation. However, I think what we're really looking at, and I can appreciate you coming from planning and development and wanting it to really come out from that process, but I think really the process has begun, and we've talked about this in the past, is whatever the recommendation is coming out of this body, it goes to the city council. The city council has a zoning subcommittee, they have a neighborhood subcommittee. I think at that point, if the neighbors come out and express what their concerns are, and the city council weighs that, it may start the process of, it'll either be an up and down vote, or they'll send it to the zoning subcommittee, send it to the neighborhood subcommittee, because as we found, we're really not in a position to instruct DPD to do a study and to provide some sort of an analysis to us. That's not what this body is governed to do. So at this point, I think is what we need to provide a recommendation, whether it be a negative recommendation or positive or no finding. And then the city council, in their deliberations, in making the binding vote, can determine and recommend that enough questions have been raised, enough of the issues that we have discussed here, that they feel is not adequately addressed at site plan review. And be that as it may, I must say that regardless of the analysis that takes place prior to saying, okay, we're okay and comfortable with allowing this, it comes back to it. You cannot make a vote on a zoning change conditional. You just can't. So even if you go through that analysis and you go through the subcommittee meetings and you go through the data analysis and you come up with, in essence, they do the site plan review at a neighborhood or a zoning subcommittee, the applicant can still come back with something different. So I can appreciate where you're coming from in all of this, I really do. And I think it really comes down to, as individuals, if it's something that certainly we feel strongly on, and again, Edward Street, I felt strongly on giving a negative recommendation on that. I think that's the obligation of this body, and then at this point, I mean, it's the obligation of really the city council, whether or not they think it's an up and down vote, or whether or not they feel they need to send it to a zoning subcommittee or neighborhood subcommittee. But again, I think the type of analysis you're looking for, we've discussed this at this body. We're not in a position to instruct DPD to do this. It really has to come from the council instructing the city manager to instruct DPD. So I can appreciate the type of analysis you're talking about, and I think that's perhaps what the city council, if they so feel that is what's required, probably should direct it in that direction. And certainly if we don't feel there's enough information here to feel comfortable with it, we certainly could give a negative recommendation, and we have in the past as individuals done that, or voted against the proposal. But I think really that's where we are at this point. So, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any further comments? If not, we need a motion to recommend, whether we recommend or deny the zoning to go forward before the city council.
Mr. Chairman, I'll recommend the proposed zoning amendment as presented for approval to the city council.
We have a motion for approval. Mr. Fischett?
Just a point of discussion, should we not request or make it conditional upon receiving a letter from the solicitor regarding the spot zoning?
I don't think we can do that. What'll happen is that they'll be addressed at the council, you know.
Oh, well, at
Yeah.
that point, okay.
Yeah.
All right, well, I'll second the motion.
Okay, we have a motion in favor of the zoning recommendation and second it. All in favor, say aye.
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 Chair votes yes. Any opposition?
No.
Okay, so we have 3 in favor of the motion to recommend to the city council and 1 against. Therefore, the motion carries.
Thank you.
Mr. Flood, you said you're on for public hearing next Tuesday
Next
night?
Tuesday.
Tuesday.
So anybody have any concerns in this matter can show up for the city council with their concerns, and they'll make the final recommendation. Thank you all very much.
Yeah.
Good luck. Thank you. Okay, moving on. Joe, do we have any notices from abutting towns or anything else that concerns in the packet?
Not really, Mr. Chairman. We have had a bit of an uptick in activity here in the city, and we have a number of proposals that have come in for this board. One is the project on Andrew Street that came for a rezone previously and came in for a pre-application. They've submitted their full application. That'll be on for the next meeting. You'll also have another special permit for a lot width proposal over on Burnside Street. There's another rezone petition. That'll be on Gorham Street. It's the old 1400 Motors area. There's a portion of the property that's currently in a TTF zone that's being sought to be brought into the SMU zoning district. And another similar part of this development is an amendment to a previously approved plan for the addition on Marginal Street. The latest addition that was brought before the board included the addition coming over where the smokestack was, so the smokestack would have had to have been demolished. Now, what they're looking to do is to angle the addition so the smokestack would not be demolished. That'll affect a little bit of the landscaping and the parking over in that area. So that'll also be in front of this board at the next meeting. And finally, the latest development over at the Duville Senior Care Facility has been submitted. That'll be on for the first meeting of May. It's a 60-unit building that they're looking to have over there. 45 units would be live-in area, and 15 units would be for those that have memory loss issues. So that would be an expansion of their campus. And that's an affordable assisted living facility. So that will be on the first meeting of May.
All right, thank you. Do we have any general correspondence from any board members for additional boards they're on?
No,
Any-
nothing at this time, no.
Any further comments from board staff then?
You'd have a set of minutes, right, I think?
I know on the agenda we had a set of minutes, but I think I spoke with you earlier, they weren't finalized yet. You want to put those on for the next meeting?
Yes, that would be preferable, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, so we'll put those on for the next meeting, because I spoke with them briefly about that, and I said, I didn't know if I missed them in my packet.
Yeah, I got an email, yeah.
I got them right here.
Oh, you got them?
I got an email, yep.
Okay.
All right.
The
no problem.
17th.
Whether they come in, I didn't see them, so we'll put that on for the next meeting. So if any other further comments from the board members, if not, we'll entertain.
Mr. Chairman, I did have something I wanted to ask about, an old project.
Sure.
The Lowell General Hospital parking lot expansion. They were building their new parking lot, and the decision included a condition that they would work with you on creating a landscaping plan, that they were going to add a tree box in the parking lot. Has that gotten finalized yet?
I haven't had any discussions with anybody at Lowell General about that yet. I can check with my colleague Swati Joseph, see if she's had any conversations with them. I didn't oversee that project, so they haven't had any conversations with me at this point.
Okay.
But
As, you know, we often do this, that we include conditions that they'll work with, the applicant will work with staff on finalizing these plans. And there's sort of a range of those, and some of them are what type of flowers are they gonna pick? And, but other ones are pretty substantial about, you know, where and how big, and what kind of landscaping plan are they going to have, period. And on those larger ones, on the ones you think that there was, you know, meaningful material decisions that had to be made after the fact, I'd like to find out more about how those end up. You know, what we left with was something like an area about the size of 4 parking spaces somewhere in the parking lot. You know, if we could just start getting more reporting
I mean, what we can do is we can always ask for the follow-up in the landscaping plan. I think a lot of the ways we've left it in the past, and I made it pretty clear, I know when Aaron was here, and I think now they're dealing with Joe a little more, you know, if they ever have any question about the landscaping plan and their disagreement, bring it right back before us. You
Right.
know, and at any point in time, and I think sometimes we phrased it, and I think Jerry's done it a couple of times, if I can remember correctly, is we want to see the plan back before us. Matter of fact, a couple of years ago, when we were at a seminar on that across the hall, they came up and, you know, they said to us, you know, one of the recommendations we have is don't throw too much on staff. You know, because, and I know sometimes in the past, even the city engineer's office or the traffic engineer is like, I'm not exactly sure what I'm supposed to do here. You know, and they get stuck by what our recommendation is. We're like, well, you know, when they come back, we're not sure. And they say, well, bring it back.
Yes,
You know,
but-
I have no problem with that. And, if, you know, if they say, you know, bring it back to us for the final approval. And I think, I'm like, we had one recently, I think you put it that way, Jerry, if I remember. And we're like, you know, let us see it, and then if staff's okay with it, everybody's okay, we'll sign it. And if we have a problem with it, tell the applicant, we have a little problem, bring them back. But I agree with what you're saying, you know, you want to follow up on it, they bring a new plan in, ask them to bring it over, especially something of that size.
Yeah.
You know, the smaller things, you know, we really trust DPD to do things like that, but anything of big size, you know, development and plans, I mean, we went out on Middlesex Street before, remember for the site plan, over there by the karate place?
Oh, yeah,
and,
we
we
walked-
walked the whole side, we looked at the, you know,
Yeah,
they're
this
supposed to have all
side
these
with the
plants and the
ladies.
little things breaking up the, breaking
Mr. No.
up the parking lot. Well, guess what? They weren't there, were they? No. But they weren't planned. And then we're walking through, we're like, where's the landscape in the parking lot? Oh, wait a minute. You know, we were there looking at the wall, first of all. And then we ended up crawling up the snowbanks
in the
by the
middle of the
wall,
winter,
looking over,
too,
right?
yeah.
And then we go back around, look at the parking lot and said, what's missing in the parking lot? You know, so, that, you know, it's a valid point to, you know, bring some of those back and take a look to see if, you know, because your question of, you know, do some things get overlooked? Yeah, I mean, you know, do we have the final say? Does the bottom line rest with us? Yeah, it does.
And I know Mr.
I
Boyle.
I was really just asking about an old project because of my own interest to see how it turned out. But the chairman's point, really, don't be shy. Feel free to come by, really, at
No,
the
put it under
drop.
old
If you're
business.
getting any pushback at all from these developers, by all means, drag them before us. Quite frankly, I think it might be beneficial for that to happen a couple of times. So that,
Say, you know, put on
so
the
that there
agenda,
is
let
some
them know.
understanding about what
gotta show
work
up
with
again.
staff really means. Really,
I know
don't be
they-
shy.
They tend to get pushed to the
Like,
back.
that's a good point, Joe, you know, you say, you know, just let you know, these are the plans, we're comfortable with it, and want to make sure the planning board's okay or not, you know. We do know they drive around the neighborhood, they do look at things and say, is that what I approved? I mean, we've all seen that, sometimes you say, well, I see a few things missing here. You know, so I mean, if he's said to him, you know, I'm bringing it back with them, you have a right to be there if you want, but I'm gonna bring it before the board and say, this is what we agreed to. And then I think if we generate a discussion, if we were on and off on it, you know, then, you know, we'll tell the applicant, we want him back here.
But I know, and this hasn't happened in Joe's time here, but we've actually visited other sites too, when there's been some issues on
Yeah.
Clark Road.
Oh, yeah.
We were there with the building
Yeah, the one on
inspector
Clark
and
Road
the
was a
attorneys.
Yeah,
and-
we've taken motions before to do,
Yeah.
you know, to do a site walk. Yeah, we did it at the
And this was
bottom.
approvals that we had made, and there were some issues afterwards, and.
When they got stuck in the middle, we said, no, we're going up there.
Yeah.
But
I think it
Well,
the
the
same
old
thing.
Mother Hubbard thing.
Yeah,
was
bottom of
another
Perry
one.
Street, I was just gonna say, yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That way, yeah,
I remember walking through there before they ripped it down. Oh, boy. It was a tough one.
yeah. that was-
Because they talked about, what the big thing was the odor they had inside there was impermeated into the woodwork and everything.
Right.
Even,
even the brick.
Old Mother Hubbard up there in,
Roger
Street.
Yeah. Even, what's that, Servpro couldn't get the stuff out. Couldn't get the smell out.
Right.
So we're like, you know, because part of the building was a very nice building.
Yep.
And part of the wood texture and everything else, we can't. They'll come in, they'll do it, there's no guarantee. So they finally had to rip the whole thing down. And they didn't want to, because part of it looked kind of nice inside. But the thing was, they would never, ever get the smell out of it. And they said, we, you know, Servpro, you know, who's always good, fire, smoke, and everything, we can't guarantee we're gonna get it out. We'll go in and do it, but, and then we finally get to the point, they're like back and forth, back and
Boy,
forth.
that was something, yeah.
They finally ripped it down, development was approved. Now I see that, starting a little more development
Yeah, they
on
are,
Perry
yeah,
Street.
yeah.
You know, for a while it went dormant because
more
the
going
market, right? I mean, it was, when we walked through it and saw some of the buildings, we're like, if they put it at this price to begin with, maybe they would have sold, but we have no control of what they try to sell them at, you know? But that was I remember.
But that was a good example. That was subject to neighborhood character special permit. We approved it with a certain look, a certain rhythm
was
of the
architectural
windows
stuff.
and the overhangs, and that's not what they ended up with. So we ended up having a site visit out there to say, hey, what went wrong? What can we do to adjust it?
What do they start, they call them start with the C, little, you know what I mean? The
Yeah.
little thing over the entryways that we
Yeah,
wanted.
yeah, no,
Yeah,
we had them
yeah,
change the
yeah.
What was
design.
the name of
Yeah.
those, remember? They were,
Yeah, I forget.
Transoms?
no, what's the little entryways over them? We called them porticos. or something. Was that what it was, the porticos?
Yeah,
Yeah, remember,
yeah,
they didn't put them there.
they didn't put
And we
'em
wanted that individual breakdown to make it,
Right.
to make it show more like each individual unit had more of a family style.
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
well, and it-
Instead of just a barrack type. thing.
Right,
You know what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah.
So, yeah, we'll put them in. We go, well, where are they? Oh, well, we can't do them. What do you mean you can't do them? You know?
Yeah, to your point, Mr. Chairman.
And then
the-
we had, they had to put the arborvitae's in to take care of the electrical units
Yeah.
on the
Right,
sides, and, you
yeah,
know,
yeah,
they didn't
yeah.
cover those up. And then we ended up, we wanted the plaque out front, and they
Well,
didn't
yeah,
put
there was a
that in,
little
right?
sign
And then we
there, yeah,
finally make
yeah.
it, like, okay, where is it? Well, we're working on it. I'm like,
Not a
well,
historical
you know,
commission.
yeah. So, I mean, a couple times it's happened, so it's a good point, you know, you get something big like that, you ever want it to your follow-up, they get stuck, fine. Or if there's anything you ever want, you can just call them and ask to put it on under old business and see if they bring the old plans in. You know, I mean, that's why I think a lot of times when we tell them, you know, especially to bring it back before us, you know, a lot of times, you know, we know like the plantings, you have a certain person who was doing that for a long time with the city, you know, like, so you relied on their recommendations, basically. You know, like saying, okay, these trees are better than these trees because of what, and how far down to dig, and how much light they're gonna get, something of those natures. But we went out there and we said, okay, put those trees in here, fix the porticos, fix this, fix that, here's the 5 conditions, and not,
Right,
because then, they went to get the occupancy permit and they wouldn't sign off. And so they had to come back before us, and we said, okay, we're going out there. It's either there or it's not. And here's your checklist. We walked through, show us one at a time. I remember we went and looked at all the apartments.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right, to your point, Mr. Chairman, was a big focus on the reorganization that happened in the city with the Planning and Development Office and the Inspectional Services Office, was to make sure that these conditions of approval that the board works hard to ensure that a project's going to have, and that
Oh, it's so
there's a real purpose behind them, are actually getting implemented. And
That's why sometimes you see something come back, and they're like, they're not signing up. Well, we didn't do it. Well,
Right.
they want to come in and ask for forgiveness, like on some of those things. Well, we already built it. What do you think we should do? I said, I don't know.
Right.
You didn't meet the condition. You told me what you should do.
And to the point,
You're like, I'm sorry, but, you know what I mean?
Meet the condition.
I mean, is it better if I ask for forgiveness, later, instead of, if we approve something? I think a good point was that Red Cross building.
Yeah, yeah.
You know what I mean? They
Yeah,
started it, they
yeah,
built it
that
up,
one.
they got caught, they come back,
Yeah.
and then they said, all right, tell us what has to be done.
Yeah. And we made them change it.
Yeah,
We made them
you know what I
change it.
mean?
Made 'em change it.
I mean, it worked out nice in the long run, but it shouldn't have happened to be that way. You know what I mean? Some of that is, they approve it, and it's only as good as who's on site. The builder has to have people there who are going with the certain plans we approved. And then, the building department will go up and inspect them. I mean, I know staff goes and inspects them. I mean, I know how many times Amon's been there, and he'll say something to me if I talk to him about a meeting, and he'll tell me his concerns, and sometimes if I catch it, I'll go up and look at it myself, and, instead of putting staff on it, I say, gee, I was up there myself, where's this?
Yeah.
But yeah, I took it to the point to make sure that we follow up on these type of special conditions, And as Jerry has conditions, right, Jerry?
Yeah.
Non-binding conditions.
Non-binding
Is that what
conditions,
you've been-
yeah.
Yeah, he is from the neighborhood group. You put these
Non-condition conditions, yeah.
Non-conditions, conditions, we're like, well,
But I joined this board in September 2012, and I haven't seen any of these plans come back. So,
Very few that do, if any.
like Jerry said, there haven't been any in that amount of time. So really, if we can be more of a resource for the planning office, to give you more hand as you're dealing with
really
these
comes
developers
back
getting
to
these things
them,
built,
right?
do not be shy. You are not overburdening us with this by any means.
oh, yeah. And I think,
We'd be pleased
them
at the
leverage.
opportunity. I think
Yeah,
if we
we
were to
will.
do it a couple of times, we might not have to do it
Yeah.
thereafter.
That's a good point.
And if
It
they
is,
say,
yeah.
then they come in and say, okay, we'll put, and sometimes we get the argument, we put these in because of that reason. You're like, oh, okay, we didn't know that at the time. And like, a couple of problems we had before when we approved some sites was, when they go to put the boxes in for the utilities.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that
And it's
gets-
like,
Oh, yeah.
this is where it has to be, and we've dealt with that so many times now. The first time was very
And it's
frustrating.
ugly.
And then after they come back and say, we told them it was there, and they said, no, we don't care what you tell us, we're putting it where we
Yeah,
want.
that project on
Right,
Moody Street was a
right.
good
Yeah,
example.
exactly, that's
of
what
that.
Or
I'm
a
thinking. And they come back and they
transformer
change it, and we're like, honestly, we still want it in the old spot, but what the National Grid says,
yeah.
it goes where we tell you it's going.
Right.
And I remember we saw that 2 or 3 times, and then when the developer come in, we know what you're dealing with, It's like,
It was with Jeanne d'Arc, at least, was decent enough to come back.
yeah, I mean, and,
Before they built it.
yeah,
Oh,
and I mean,
yeah,
give
that
people credit
building
like that,
down
and,
there looks good,
some of the things they had was so minor, whether they've been picked up or not, but at least they came back, which was nice, We say, okay, we had a problem with this, can we amend it? And, and then we, the question is, a substantial material change or it's a minor? Obviously, in that case, it was a minor one, it was a consensus of the board.
Right.
But then if not, boom, right back to public, what, So, and if it's usually something like landscaping, they'll fix it before they come back here on a public hearing.
Yeah.
But you can, but I agree with you, Joe, on that, if any question, have staff bring it forward. I'm thinking, with Joe's now hit the meetings with us, so if he has any feedback on that, he can reach out to any one of us. I mean, we talk every day before the planning board meetings and anything in the interim during the week, so, I always encourage him, if you have any questions, bring them right to us, and then you can say, okay, this is what you got, we think it should be this way, let staff know, and staff will let the board know, and we'll get back to you.
We would view such an action as an opportunity, not a burden.
Yeah, because I think after we had that educational training, I think we have fine-tuned how we make our recommendations. Wouldn't you say, Jerry?
Yes,
I mean,
yeah.
what we've seen since that time period? I'm not going to talk about variances, but we saw a lot of that night, too, because it was a combined meeting before planning board and the zoning board, and we were both there. Actually, it was two different public hearings, two different public meetings. we had.
Workshops, yep.
Yeah, workshops, which were very
Oh,
helpful.
yeah, down, yeah.
We
yeah,
had them in the
it
meals
was.
reception, remember?
Yeah,
And it
it
was
was good.
basically about how to make the recommendations, how to
Very
make it
good.
easier for staff, how it's easier for the law department, how to follow through with it, and, which is the best way of making the recommendations.
They did record it. I mean, they were gonna use it for new board members. Did you ever get a?
We had that,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Did you get that?
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
yeah, those workshops we
Yeah,
had?
they were pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were, yeah.
Okay, so anything else, any further? Thank you, any of the board members? No? Okay, hearing none, we entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved?
Motion made, second, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Chair votes yes, we have adjourned. Good night, and thank you, everyone. See if it's started raining yet, Jerry, what do you think?
Yeah, we don't see enough.